The first grapnel hit the convoy's rear rig at dawn plus 11 minutes, and Della Marsh was laughing before the sound of it finished crossing the salt. The grapnel was combine work, a claim anchor, fat as a barrel, fired from a tilt-fan gunwing that had been pacing them since first light. It struck the trailing rig, the Sparrow, just behind the last axle, punched its barbs into the skirt plating, and began paying out cable, trying to drag 400 tons of rolling steel to a stop the way a fisherman tires out something too big for his boat. "Sparrow, you've grown a tail," Della said into the radio, and her voice came out of every speaker in the convoy at a volume that nobody had ever successfully asked her to lower. "Yusuf, you want to keep it? It matches your paint." "Cutting it now," Yusuf Antar said somewhere back in the dust. "Cut it pretty. The whole sky is watching." The whole sky was. Hadra's, the white sun, had come up over the rim of the brine fields half an hour ago and laid the world out flat and blinding. 700 kilometers of salt pan, rust trough, glass reach, and dead sea bottom between the Leith Works and the Meridian Cut, every centimeter of it daylit, every centimeter of it combined charter ground until the very last one. Above the convoy, 3 gunwings held formation like patient gulls. Behind it, raising a dust wall of their own, came the claim riders, 24 low-fast wheel hunters out of Panage Station, sworn men of the Velici Combine, paid by the recovery. And in the middle of all that attention, doing 140 kilometers an hour across ground that the Combine's own surveyors had rated, impassable above 60, rolled 5 freight rigs and 2 outrider trikes carrying 341 former property of the Velici Combine toward the line where the word former would finally be true. Della had the lead. She always had the lead. Her rig was the Verdigris, 8 axles, 3 trailers, a crawler hauler built 40 years ago to carry evaporator sections out to the brine fields, and rebuilt by Della's own hands to do several things its designers would have fainted over. Her cab sat 4 meters off the ground. Her steering wheel was wrapped in cord she'd braided herself. Bolted to the roof above her head, salvaged off a wrecked ocean freighter on a world she'd left at 19, was a 2-tone brass horn the size of a dog. And as the Sparrow's crew burned through the claim cable with a cutting torch and the anchor dropped, away into the salt like a pulled tooth, Della reached up and gave the cord 2 long pulls and a short one. The sound rolled out over the pan, low, high, then the short bark, brass and air, older than every machine chasing them, 2 longs and a short, still rolling, still free. In the seat beside her, folded into the corner of the cab with his webbed hands pressed flat together, Im of the Shallows flinched at the horn the way he flinched every time. Then did the thing with his throat pouch that Della had learned was the Chiniri version of a smile that embarrasses its owner. "You enjoy that," Im said. His voice was a wet reed instrument, all breath. "I enjoy everything today," Della said. "Today's the best day of my life and it's 11 minutes old. Drink some water. The young ones in trailer 2 count your horn." Bryke tells them, as long as the horn says 2 and 1, no one comes through the door. They have begun to say it back to him. 2 and 1. 2 and 1. Im's pouch worked. 300 years my line has been on the Combine's clay, driver. We have never had a sound that meant safe before. "It doesn't mean safe," Della said, swinging the wheel 2 degrees to put the Verdigris's left wheels along a spine of hardpan she could read by. Color alone by the faint gray bloom of salt that grew only where the crust ran deep and true. The whole convoy swung behind her in sequence, each rig tracking her line like beads on a string. "It means moving. Out here those are different gods. You want safe? You should have stayed in the evaporators." "In the evaporators," Im said, "we were safe the way the brine shrimp are safe in the catch pans." "Yeah," Della said. "I know. That's why I'm driving fast." She kicked the speed up another 4 kilometers an hour, and the white land howled by, and behind her, in trailer, 280 children of a species that had been mortgaged before it had been met, were chanting 2 and 1, 2 and 1 to the rhythm of her horn. The radio crackled. Channel 9, the convoy band. "Lead, this is Patience." Andre Park's voice, the oldest voice in the convoy, dry as the pan. "Wheel hunters are splitting their pack. 12 staying on our dust, 12 swinging wide south. They're going to try to get ahead of us at the rust truss and put a wedge into the column." "Course they are," Della said. "It's what I'd do if I were slow and sad and worked for a salt baron." "Saba, you copy?" "Copy lead." Saba rode knock-knock. The lead trike, a welded insect of a machine, currently flickering along the convoy's southern flank with a sail of dust behind it. "Take Quill. Go make friends with that southern pack. Don't fight them. Just make them drive like they're being asked questions." "My favorite kind of conversation," Saba said, and knock-knock peeled away south with the second trike behind it, and Della put her eyes back on the land coming at her at 144 kilometers an hour. This is what the land was, dead ocean. Hadrasa had owned seas once, shallow and warm and worldwide, and then 100,000 years of the white sun had boiled them down to brine. pockets and salt flats, and the bones of reefs standing out of the pan like the ruins of cities. The Veliky Combine owned the evaporation rights to a third of the planet. Brine in, minerals out, lithium salts, bromine, 11 flavors of industrial chloride, and money in a thickness that needed its own kind of math. And wading chest-deep in the catch pans, tending the crystal beds with webbed hands that the chemistry ate at anyway, the Chiniri. Brought in 3 centuries ago under labor contracts their great-great-grandparents had signed with Marx because nobody had bothered teaching them letters yet. Every contract renewed automatically at birth. Every child born on combine clay owing the combine for the water it gestated in. Each of them wore the debt around the neck. A chit of fired blue clay, palm-sized, stamped with a Veliky seal and a bond number, strung on a cord. The chit was the contract. That was the elegant cruelty of it. The law older than the accord. The debt lives in the clay. Lose your chit and you owed the combine a chit plus the debt it carried. Break your chit and you'd broken the combine's property, which was also still you. 341 of those chits were riding in Della's convoy this morning. Hanging on 341 necks, paid off at 4 minutes past dawn in the freight office at the Leith Works. Every centum of 31 years of pooled secret wages, plus the entire surety bond of the Free Carriers Guild, Hadrasa Local, which was to say, plus everything Della Marsh and every driver behind her owned or would own for a decade if this went wrong. The Combine had taken the payment. The Combine's own factor had stamped the manumission writ because the law said he had to. And then, at dawn plus 4 minutes, the same factor had filed a counter-writ declaring the manumission contingent on review, the persons named therein recoverable assets in transit, and the entire Brinefield Charter Zone, all 700 kilometers of it, between lay the works and the Meridian Cut, lawful ground for recovery. Inside the charter line, they were cargo that had absconded with itself. 1 step past the Meridian Cut, on accord ground, they were 341 free persons whom no writ could touch, and every chit on every neck was just baked mud, 700 kilometers, one day, everyone driving. Della had read the counter-writ on her cab screen at dawn plus 6 minutes, parked at the head of a convoy she'd spent 4 months quietly assembling for exactly this morning, and the whole freight office had heard her laugh through 2 walls. Then she'd keyed the convoy band and said the only briefing she figured anybody needed. They want to argue in their courtroom. We're going to argue in mine. Roll. That had been an hour ago. Now the rust troughs were coming up out of the shimmer ahead. A belt of iron-stained gullies where an old seam of ore had bled into the seabed for 10,000 wet years, kilometer after kilometer of red trenches running mostly the right direction, mostly. The southern pack of wheel hunters was a dust smear converging on the same point, with 2 smaller, brighter smears, Saba and Quill, orbiting them like flies with opinions, and dropping down the morning sky from the north, white and clean and silent in a way nothing combine-built ever was, came a craft Della had been expecting since first light. It was a glide skiff, long and narrow, wings like a folded letter. It carried no guns, no grapnels, no combine green. It was painted the flat, blameless white of the Accord Adjudicate, and it slotted itself into the air 500 meters off Della's cab window and matched her speed exactly the way a level matches a line. Her radio ticked over to the open band of its own accord. Adjudicate override. Their equipment did that everywhere, by treaty, convoy lead. The voice was Tyndall. She'd heard the species twice before, at tribunal hearings in Padre Crossing. It sounded like someone playing a flute very slowly inside a library. This vessel is the Plumb Line, Witness Heil commanding. Under the Accord of Common Carriage, Article 9, we are assigned to observe and record all events bearing on the status of the 341 persons in your charge until their status is resolved. We are not your ally, we are not your enemy, we are the record. Do you understand and acknowledge? Witness Heil, Della said, with delight pouring off her voice like heat off the pan. I understand, I acknowledge, and I want you to know you have the best seat on this whole planet. You watching close? A pause, flute slow. We are required to. Outstanding, Della said. Watch this. She reached the first rust gully doing 140. Read the far lip in a quarter-second glance. Undercut on the left, packed hard on the right where ancient floodwater had rammed gravel into the bank, and took the verdigris down and through and up the right-hand line with all 8 axles working, 3 trailers cracking the whip behind her in a controlled shudder she rode with her whole body, wheel moving in small constant corrections, 2 fingers and a thumb. 400 tons of rig went through a trench that would have swallowed a survey crawler and came out the other side, still doing 112, accelerating. Behind her, one by one on her exact line because her line was the only one that worked, came Patience, then Mother Opal, then the tanker Long Drink, then the Sparrow, each of them blowing red dust to the sky. Inside the white skiff, unheard by anyone on the ground, Witness Heil of the adjudicate stopped taking notes for 3 full seconds. Second witness, Heil said at last, the lead vehicle. Confirm for the record which guidance system executed that maneuver. Second witness Morn checked the instruments twice. No guidance system, witness. No rail, no beacon lock, no terrain autopilot. The vehicle has a manual override engaged. A hesitation. It appears it is always engaged. The human is steering it, herself, with her hands, at that mass, at that speed, on unsurveyed ground. Yes, witness. Heil looked down at the rust-colored country and the 5 rigs threading it like a needle pulled by a running child, and made the first marginal note of the day that was not required by any article of the Accord. The Combine is attempting to recover cargo. Preliminary observation. That is not what is down there. The rust troughs ate the next 40 minutes in red bites. The Southern Wheel Hunter pack tried twice to push a wedge into the column. Once at a gully fork where the convoy had to slow to 80, once at a long parallel stretch where 3 hunters came alongside the Sparrow with boarding ladders already swung out, like pirates who had read about trains. The first time, Della simply didn't slow down. She read the fork 2 kilometers out, called left line, all rigs, trust me, the right line's a sucker's road and they know it, and took the left fork at a speed that made even Andre Park breathe in, through his teeth. The left line was narrower, rougher, and shorter, and it spat the convoy out 90 seconds before the wheel hunters' blocking party finished setting up on the right line so that the hunters were treated to the sight of 5 rigs and 7,000 tons of dust going by behind them, horn blowing 2 and 1, while their spike chains were still lying slack on the wrong road. The second time, when the boarding ladders came out, Della called the Sparrow up to full speed and then talked Yusuf, calmly, loudly, through holding his line absolutely straight while she herself dropped the verdigris back along the column, overtaking in reverse order, a 400-ton fish swimming against its own school, until her rearmost trailer ran flank to flank with the lead hunter's ladder. Morning, she said on the open band so everyone could hear it. You boys are about to put a ladder on a moving rig. I've done it. It's harder than it looks. You want to know the trick? The hunter, to his credit, kept his nerve. Surrender the assets, driver, and you can keep your license. The trick, Della said, as if he hadn't spoken, is the wind shadow. Right where you're putting your wheels, my trailer kills the crosswind. Feels nice and calm. Then you climb, and your bike's in the shadow, but you're not. Your shoulders come up into 40 knots of dirty air over my deck line. Every time. Physics doesn't take the Combine centum. She let that sit for half a second. Climb that ladder and the pan gets you at 110. Or drop back. Tell your marshal the wind was unlawful. I'll back your story. The ladder hovered. The hunter looked at the rushing salt, and at the trailer's deck rail and at the gap between. He dropped back. All 3 hunters dropped back, and the convoy band filled with whooping. Yusuf and Castor Lyle and Henevo and Saba all howling like the young. Idiots most of them still were, and even old Andre saying dryly, Lead, one day you'll write down the physics and we can all stop sweating, and over it, under it, through it, Della's laugh, huge and unashamed. In Trailer 2, Bright translated the exchange for 80 children, embellishing freely. The chant changed for a while after that. 2 and 1, the wind is hers. 2 and 1, the wind is hers. Im listened to it coming through the trailer wall behind the cab and held his own chit in his webbed fist, the blue clay worn smooth by 300 years of necks, and said nothing at all for 19 kilometers. Then driver. May I ask what the trick actually is? That was the trick, Della said. The wind shadow's real. I just told him the truth loud enough that it sounded like a weapon. And if he had climbed anyway, then I'd have swerved my trailer and he'd have invented a new sport. She shrugged. Truth first, though. Always offer the truth first. It's cheaper and it's funnier. The pouch worked, slow. The Combine has never once offered us the truth first. I know, Della said. That's why their convoy's behind mine. At kilometer 91, the rust troughs gave out onto open pan again, and the whole shape of the day was suddenly visible at once, drawn in dust on a table of white, the convoy's plume running west, long and proud. The northern hunter pack hanging off its rear like a torn flag, the southern pack regrouping in a sulk, the 3 gunwings turning lazy circles overhead, conserving fuel and patience, the white skiff of the adjudicate holding station, exact, eternal, off Della's window. And out ahead, just clearing the horizon's shimmer, something new. Something big enough to show at 40 kilometers, a square-shouldered landmass with a wake of dust like a weather front, sitting fat and certain astride the only graded freight road on the western pan. Andre saw it the same second she did. Lead. That'll be the Gravamen. That'll be the Gravamen, Della agreed. The Combine's recovery flagship. A mobile dock, a rolling fortress, a 4-deck land dreadnought with a vehicle bay that could swallow her whole convoy, and a master aboard who held the recovery writ in his own name. Factor Vesh Amarat. The man whose seal was stamped into the clay on 341 necks, the radio clicked. Not the convoy band. Not the open band. A private hail addressed to her rig alone, carrying the green priority flash of a combine factor's office. Della looked at it for a second. Then she grinned, cracked her neck left and right, reached up and pulled the horn, 2 longs and a short, loud enough to flush birds that had never existed on this world, before she keyed the channel. "Verdigris," she said. "You're paying for the call, factor, so talk fast. I'm a working driver, and it's a beautiful day, and the road's free all the way to the cut." The voice that came back was Sarkel, and it was everything she'd expected. Cultured, unhurried, faintly amused. The voice of a being who had never in its long mineral life been late for anything because the world had always agreed to wait. "Driver Marsh, Vesh Amarat, factor of the Western Brine Fields. I want to begin by saying that I bear you no ill will whatsoever." "That's a relief," Della said. "I was worried this was going to be one-sided. You are, in fact, the finest carrier ever to hold a Hadrasa Guild card. Your on-time rate over 11 years is a standing embarrassment to our own logistics division. I have personally approved bonuses to you on 4 occasions." A pause silk-lined. "Which is why it grieves me to see you destroy yourself over an administrative misunderstanding." "Is that what's chasing me? An administrative misunderstanding? It's got a lot of wheels, factor. The manumission instrument you witnessed this morning was accepted in error. The pooled wage accounts it drew upon contain funds whose provenance is under review. Until that review concludes, the persons in your convoy remain, regrettably, encumbered assets. The writ in my hand is entirely lawful. The adjudicate vessel pacing you will confirm as much." The flute voice of witness Heil entered the channel with the smoothness of a thing entitled to enter any channel it liked. "The adjudicate confirms the counter-writ is procedurally valid within charter territory. The adjudicate further confirms the manumission writ is procedurally valid everywhere else. Both documents cannot survive the day. We are here to record which one does." "There it is," Della said. "Cleanest summary you'll ever get for free, factor. One of our pieces of paper dies at the meridian cut. Mine gets stronger the farther west I drive. Yours gets weaker. I can hear it wheezing from here. 700 kilometers, Driver Marsh." Amarat's voice never lifted, never hurried. "Across my charter, through my stations, past my garrisons, over roads my surveyors graded and my engineers maintain. You are a remarkable driver, but you are a tenant on this pan, and the pan is mine. I am offering you once the tenant's exit. Halt your convoy, surrender the encumbered persons into adjudicate-supervised custody. Gently, witness. Gently, all in view of your instruments, and the Combine will not only return the Guild's surety bond intact, it will forget every name on your manifest. Every driver keeps a license. Every driver keeps a future. I will even personally reopen the manumission review next quarter with a sympathetic eye." The convoy band was silent. 5 rigs and 2 trikes. Listening on the repeat channel, 341 passengers, feeling the words through translation and trailer walls. "That's a real offer," Della said. "I want everybody to notice the factor made a real offer. Gold standard, by Combine Lights. Now I'm going to answer it. And witness? I'd like this in the record word for word, because folks are going to ask." "The record is open," Heil said. Della keyed the wheel-mounted transmitter so she could keep both hands working, because the glass reach was coming up under her wheels. The old lagoon bed where the brine had cooked to silica sheet, 130 kilometers of fused green-white glare, the fastest and most treacherous ground on the western run. Factor Amarat. "This morning at 4 past dawn, your own office took 31 years of wages your company pretended it wasn't paying, plus everything my guild owns, and stamped a paper that says the people behind me own themselves. You had the money by sunrise. The review, the provenance, the encumbrance. That's the sound a vault makes when it notices the door worked. So here's the counter-offer." She took a breath, and when she spoke again, it was at full Della Marsh volume, the voice that could fill a freight office through 2 walls, joyous and hard as the brass on her roof. "You want them back? Catch up. You want my license? Catch me. You want this convoy? It's doing 150 across the glass reach in a minute, and every centimeter is legal, and the only paper that's going to matter tonight is the one I deliver. I'm a carrier. I'm carrying. The road's free, the day's long, and you, factor, are losing daylight standing on it." She cut the channel. She pulled the horn, 2 longs and a short, and the convoy band exploded, and somewhere behind her head 80 children took up a chant that no longer needed translating. In the white skiff, second witness Morn finished the verbatim transcript with hands that were not entirely steady, which was a thing Tyndall hands did not do, and looked up to find Heil watching the lead rig. "Witness, for the formal index. How shall I classify her response, as a refusal of lawful demand, or as a declaration of intent to abscond?" Heil was quiet for a moment, watching the verdigris reach the edge of the silica sheet and flow onto it. Without slowing, watching the convoy spread out behind into running formation, wide-spaced, staggered, each rig offset from the dust of the one ahead. A formation that appeared in no combine logistics manual because no combine guidance system would consent to drive it. Classify it as carriage, Heil said. She has told us exactly what she is doing. She is making a delivery. The glass reach in mid-morning was a country made of mirage. The silica sheet threw the sun back up at the sky, and the sky threw it down again, and between the two of them the horizon dissolved into a shaking silver, nothing in which distance died. Speed was effortless here. The sheet was flatter than any road humans had ever paved, and so was dying. The glass was strong in the green sections and rotten in the white ones, and the white ones hid wind-cut hollows under a skin a centimeter thick, and the only warning was a change in tone, color, texture, the way dust did or didn't sit, that flickered past at 150 kilometers and the combine crossed the reach on the graded road. At 60 in convoys with ground radar, Della crossed it wherever she liked at 150 by eye. She rode the green glass like a memory of the ocean it used to be, calling the line for the rigs behind her. White bloom left, hold my track, don't be heroes. And the convoy ran 10 kilometers, 2040 with the gunwings shadowing high above and the wheel hunter packs forced down. Onto the graded road in the distance, falling behind kilometer by kilometer, riding their radar at the speed of caution. For half an hour, it was almost peaceful. It was, Della would admit later, the trap of the morning. The reach felt like hers. Then the gunwings stopped circling and made their run. They came in from astern in a line, low fast, engine screaming flat out. Not for the verdigris, but for the column's soft middle. The first one put a claim anchor through the long drink's rearmo skirt at 200 meters range. The barbs bit, the cable spooled, and the gunwing pulled up and away, paying out line, planning to drag its hook until the tanker yawed. The second gunwing fired twin anchors at Mother Opal and missed both as Castor Lyle jinked off Della's called line and back onto it with 4 centimeters of margin. The third didn't fire anchors at all. The third dropped a net. It bloomed out of the gunwing's belly ahead of Patience like a gray flower, 30 meters across, weighted at the rim, trailing shock cord, a vehicle snare rated for runaway ore crawlers, and Andre Park, with a reaction time that gave away every one of his 69 years in the best possible direction, did the one correct thing. He didn't swerve. He drove straight through the middle at 146 kilometers an hour and let physics argue with physics. The net tore, most of it. The rest of it wrapped his front left wheel cluster and the leading edge of his first trailer like wet rope, and a weighted rim block hammered through his cab side glass. And Patience went from the steadiest rig in the column to a wounded thing slewing on. Glass at speed, dragging 20 meters of snarl that was trying with every fiber to find an axle to love. Patience is fouled, Andre said. And his voice was so flat and calm that everyone understood it was bad. Net's working into cluster 1. I lose that cluster on this surface, I'm down at speed. Nobody's down today, Della said. The whole shape of the next 90 seconds assembled itself in her head while her hands did. Other things she was already easing off, already letting the column spacing breathe. Andre, no brakes. Keep 120, keep on green glass. Keep your wheels straight even if it fights you. Tarrant, from under the Verdigris's deck, where he lived in a den of spares and cable, her mechanic answered. Heard it? You want me on his rig. I want you on his rig. We do the bridge. There was a pause exactly long enough for a man to look at a photograph taped to a toolbox lid. Doing the bridge, Tarrant said. The bridge was this, and no sane carrier on Hadrasa would have recognized it as a procedure. The Verdigris easing back along the column until her rear trailer ran beside Patience's lead trailer, matched to the centimeter at 120 kilometers an hour on fused glass. A cargo crane arm swung out over the gap with a man riding its hook like a hawk on a glove. And the gap itself, a 2-meter river of screaming air and blurred silica with no bottom that mattered. Della flew her trailer beside Andre so steadily that the river's width changed by less than a handspan over a full minute. She did it while reading the glass 200 meters ahead for both rigs, calling tone changes to Andre left-handed on the radio, and singing, actually singing, loudly and not particularly well, some filthy hauler's ballad from a world neither sun had ever shone on, because Tarrant had told her once that he timed his moves to her voice, and a voice that's singing can't be a voice that's worried. Tarrant crossed the bridge. He put cutters into the net snarl, braced in the wheel cluster's service, well with the glass howling under him close. Enough to touch, and for 9 minutes he carved while Patience held Della's line and Della held everything. In the skiff, Morn had given up on shorthand and was simply recording. Heil had moved to the observation glass. Second witness. Query the archive. In the adjudicate's full record of carriage on this world. Combine, guild, military, all of it. Find me one prior instance of a repair conducted between coupled vehicles at speed on the reach without guidance systems. A silence? Machine deep. There is no prior instance, witness, on any world in the Western Accord. Then annotate the present one carefully, Heil said. Precedents should be legible. Tarrant cut the last shock cord away at kilometer 190. The snarl flew off behind Patience and skittered across the glass like a dying jellyfish, and Andre tested his cluster, sound, all bearings, all brakes, and Tarrant rode the hook home across the bridge, and Della took the verdigris back up the column to the lead with her horn blowing 2 and 1 and the convoy howling her name. It cost them 11 minutes of margin and the last innocence of the morning. Because while every eye and every hand had been on the bridge, the first gunwing had circled wide and put 2 more claim anchors into the long drink. Not to drag her down, the tanker was too heavy for that and the pilot knew it. To open her up. Lead, this is long drink. Henneveau, terse, disgusted. Those last 2 hooks hold my number 3 bunker low on the flank. I'm shedding fuel. Sealant's slowing it, but it won't hold a weld at speed. The flow's washing it out. I'm losing maybe 400 liters an hour. Della looked at her own gauges, at the column's consumption rolling up on her manifest screen, and did the arithmetic that every driver in the convoy was doing at the same moment. 5 rigs, heavy laden, running combat fast instead of economy slow. The plan had margins. The margins had assumed the tanker stayed whole. Give me the honest number, Henna. Where do we run dry? If nothing changes, we make Bitterwell with a little spare. After Bitterwell, the pause was her checking it a 3rd time. Because Henneveau was careful. After Bitterwell, if we can't take on fuel there, the heavies start dropping dead around kilometer 620, 80 short of the cut. 80 kilometers short. On the open pan, in front of the gravamen, with the whole combine recovery apparatus closing like a hand. The convoy band stayed silent. They were waiting for her. They were always waiting for her, and she had long ago stopped pretending she minded. Well, Della said, loud and bright, into 5 cabs and 2 trikes and 341 held breaths. Good news, everybody. The combine owns Bitterwell. The combine knows we need it, and the combine is certainly sitting on it right now, feeling clever. She let the grin come up through her voice like the sun coming up over the pan, which means for the first time all day, we know exactly where they'll be. I hate surprises. They went and cured me of surprises. Saba, Quill, swing wide and earn your fuel. I want eyes on Bitterwell by noon. Everyone else, 1:40. The day's wasting and I've got deliveries. She pulled the horn, 2 longs and a short, rolling out over the glass. Behind her in trailer 2, the chant had changed again. Bryke had taught them her actual words this time, as close as Chenery throats could shape them, and 80 children sent them forward through the trailer wall like a drumline. Catch up, catch up, catch up. The glass reach ended at kilometer 230 in a shore of broken silica plates, and beyond it began the country the old charts called the Lagoon Belt, and every driver alive called the Funnel. It was the last living water on the western pan, a maze of brine lagoons, acid green and dead still, separated by ridges of reef bone and exactly one, continuous causeway of compacted spoil that the combine had built 2 generations ago and maintained like everything it owned, just barely. For 90 kilometers, the causeway snaked between the lagoons with water on both sides and no second road, narrowing in places to a single rig's width plus a coward's margin. There was no line to call in the funnel, no clever route. There was the causeway, or there was brine saturated enough to float a man and corrosive enough that he'd wish it hadn't. Every pursuit on Hadrasa was won or lost in the funnel, and everyone on both sides of this one knew it. Formation change. Della called as the first lagoon slid by below, green as a bottle and patient as the combine itself. Close it up to 50 meters, nose to tail. Nobody passes anybody. Saba, Quill, you can't flank in here, so tuck in behind Sparrow and rest your wrists. Eyes on the water side. If the combines bought anybody local, this is where they spend them. Bought anybody local was already a known fact wearing a polite hat. The combine's wheel hunters were conscripted townsmen and company police, brave enough on open pan, useless in the funnel's knife fight geometry. But out among the lagoons lived the Vorda, dustmen, brine rakers, salvage clans who'd been on Hadrasa before the combine's charter and had been paid. In contempt ever since. They ran skim sleds, fan-driven skiffs that drew 10 centimeters and moved across brine and causeway alike, fast as sin, light as paper. The combine hired them for dirty work by the job, and despised them, and the Vorda took the money and despised them right back. The first sleds showed at kilometer 260, 3 dust-gray wedges lifting off a reef-bone island and falling in alongside the convoy, on the water effortless like gulls riding a ship's bow wave. Then 5 more from the south, then 4 more, 12 sleds, riding the brine on both flanks where no rig could touch them, studying the convoy with the frank professional interest of men measuring a job. They're not closing, Andre observed. They're shopping. They're shopping, Della agreed and keyed the open band. Vorta sleds. This is the convoy lead. I see 12 of you doing arithmetic. Before anybody spends blood on combined credit, let's talk numbers out loud. A voice came back, Sandrew amused, neither young nor friendly. Convoy lead, you're the loud one. The combine pays a recovery bounty per head delivered. 341 heads. It's strong money, loud one. Strongest this season. Per head delivered, Della said. When the combine ever pay a Vorta invoice whole, you'll deliver 341 and they'll count 200 and dock you for fan wash damage to their causeway. You know it, I know it, your grandmother knew it. A beat, but that's not even my argument. You want my argument? The whole pan can hear you, loud one. Make it. My argument's hanging around their necks, Della said. You've raked brine under the Velici seal for 3 generations, Dustman. They've never chitted you. You're too hard to catch. But don't tell me there's no clay in your nightmares. The people in my trailers paid the debt. 31 years of hidden wages. Paid it whole, to the centum this morning, and the combine took the money and tore up the receipt before the ink dried, because that's what clay's for. That's what it's always been for. Her voice came up, filling the band, filling the lagoons. Tonight, 80 kilometers west of here, 341 chits get broken under my wheels on a cord ground, and the combine can't do one single thing about it except watch if the convoy crosses. So that's the job on offer, Vorta. Same as the combine's job, just watching and not interfering. Except my version you get to tell your grandchildren about. What's the combine paying these days that beats being there when the clay broke? Silence on the band. 12 sleds rode the green brine. In the white skiff overhead, Morn whispered, "She is negotiating with the ambush," and Heil said, "Annotate it." Verbatim. The Sandrew voice came back at last. "They'd dock us anyway," it said, thoughtful. "For the fan wash, they'd dock you anyway." Della agreed. Another pause. "Then there's a second pack, loud one. East end of the Narrows, kilometer 290. Anchor chains rigged low across the causeway. Sledmen flanking. That pack took combine coin already. They have to spend blood for it. That's the contract. Corps' Marshall Company stiffens them. We're the second wave. We were paid to collect what's left after the chains. And now, the voice said, with the first real warmth in it, we're paid to watch. We'll be on the reef bones at the Narrows. Drive well, loud one. Nobody's ever broken clay in front of witnesses before. My grandmother would skin me if I made it not happen." The 12 sleds peeled away north in formation, light as blown ash, and were gone among the islands. "Lead," Andre said dryly on the convoy band. "Did you just recruit the ambush as an audience?" "Best crowd's a paid crowd," Della said, but her mind was already 80 seconds ahead. At kilometer 290, on anchor chains rigged low across a single-width causeway with brine on both sides. "All rigs, listen close. The Narrows are dressed for us. Chains low across the road, sled flankers and a Marshall Company spine into it. We can't flank, can't stop, can't shop for a better road." She rolled her shoulders and the grin came back into her voice like an old dog coming when called. "So we get big. Henna, how do you feel about being a door knocker?" "I feel," said Henna Vo, who was hauling several hundred tons of fuel with a hole in bunker 3, "like you'd better mean what I hope you mean and not what I'm afraid you mean." What she meant was this, and it took 4 minutes of the loudest, fastest, most precise briefing of Della's life. The long drink, heaviest rig in the column, would lead through the Narrows, not at caution speed but at full chat, with every spare meter of the convoy's anchor cable rigged off her tow lugs in a bridle, dragging 2 salvaged claim anchors, the combine's own barbed gifts, cut free that morning and kept on Sparrow's deck because Della Marsh had never thrown away anything heavy in her life, fanned out ahead of her bumper on 30 meters of line like a pair of plows. Chain met chain. That was the whole plan. Anything rigged low enough to catch axles would be caught first by 200 kilos of drag barbed steel skipping and gouging along the causeway at 130 kilometers an hour, and either ripped from its mounts or fouled into harmless snarl, and the long drink's mass would do the rest, because there is no argument on wheels that wins against a loaded tanker with a bit between her teeth. "And the marshals?" Castor asked. "The marshals," Della said, "are about to learn the difference between stopping a convoy and standing near one. They've got nets, hooks, and a writ. Writ doesn't hold a causeway. Mass holds a causeway. We're the mass." "Break!" She banged the cab wall behind her head once. "Tell Trailer 2 to sit down, hold the straps, and count my horn. If it ever stops being 2 and 1, they count to 100 and start again. It won't stop." Im beside her had gone very still. "Driver, the chains aside, the marshals will fire on you. Not on us. We are assets. You are nothing in their ledger." "Im, old friend," Della said, shifting her grip on the cord-wrapped wheel, eyes flicking between the causeway, the gauges and the dust shapes assembling in the heat shimmer 2 kilometers ahead. "I have been nothing in a rich man's ledger my whole life. It's the best place to be. Nothing's exactly what they always fail to budget for. The Narrows at kilometer 290 were a 100-meter stretch where the causeway ran between the two deepest lagoons in the belt, and the combine had dressed it well. 3 anchor chains in a staggered series bolted to driven pilings, each chain sagging just low enough to take a rig's front axles. A wall of Marshall vehicles parked beyond the last chain, netting teams on the shoulders, and on the reef-bone islands flanking the road, sledding with hook lines, the bought pack, the ones who had to spend blood for their coin. Marshal Corsena stood on the roof of his command car with optics to his eyes, watching the convoy's dust grow, waiting for it to slow. It did not slow, it got louder. The brass came first, 2 longs and a short rolling down the causeway ahead of the dust like a thrown gauntlet, and then the shape inside the dust resolved, and Cor's knuckles tightened on the optics, because the lead vehicle was the tanker, and the tanker was doing something no tanker in the history of carriage had ever been asked to do. Ahead of her bumper, on humming taut cables, 2 claim anchors tore along the causeway in fountains of spoil and sparks, leaping, biting, gouging twin trenches. A flail the width of the road, coming at 131 kilometers an hour, with 400 tons of fuel and Hennevo's set jaw behind it, and the rest of the convoy in line astern. Hold, Cor said on his company band, to men who could also see it coming. The chains will take the dragged anchors hit the first chain. The chain lost. It tore out its left piling hole, whipped across the causeway shoulder, and took the legs out from under a netting position whose crew had already decided independently to be elsewhere. The second chain fouled both anchors, snarled, stretched, and the long drink arrived. The bridle cables sang and parted, having done their work. The snarled mass of chain and anchor slammed aside, and the tanker came through the gap in the wreckage with her horn blasting one long sustained bellow, which was not a code anyone had taught the convoy, but which everyone aboard understood perfectly. The third chain's crew dropped their tackle and ran. The Marshall vehicles parked beyond, parked across a road that 400 tons was now, measuring at a closing speed of 130, discovered as one organism the merits of the causeway's shoulders. Cor's command car held position longest, 3 full seconds, which was exactly long enough for Cor to meet, through his optics, the eyes of the woman in the high cab of the second rig in line, a broad brown grinning face under a red head rag, one hand on a cord-wrapped wheel, the other pulling a horn cord, 2 longs and a short, as 400 tons of verdigris went past his bumper with 1.5 meters to spare. On the reef-bone islands, the watching Vorda, both packs, the bought and the unbought, distinctions having dissolved somewhere around the first piling, were on their feet on the sled decks, howling approval across the green water. The convoy ran the rest of the Narrows untouched. 5 rigs, 2 trikes, 341 souls, and a Marshall company behind them attempting to explain. On channels the whole pan could hear how a road dressed with 3 chains and 40 men had held the combine's quarry for a total of 11 seconds. Della let them get clear of the lagoons before she said it, because timing was everything in comedy and command both. Hennevo, she announced. Full volume, all bands, door knocker first class. Drinks are on the combine tonight, they just don't know it yet. Henna's voice came back without any victory in it at all. Lead. The Narrows cost us. That chain snarl, when it slammed aside, a piling stub came with it. Raked my whole flank. A breath. Bunker 3's torn open, Della. Not leaking, torn. And the stub kissed Bunker 2. I'm watching the sealant lose. The noon sun stood straight overhead, white as clay, and the convoy band went quiet again, and into that quiet came Andre Park's voice, very calm, with the worst news delivered as scenery. Lead. West-southwest. Look at the horizon, Della looked. The horizon was gone. Where it had been, from the southern edge of the pan to the northern, stood a wall the color of bone, kilometer on kilometer of it, churning slowly inside itself, eating the sky a degree at a time. Salt storm. The pan's one native god. Wind off the high desert, picking up the whole dead ocean's dust and walking it east in a blind white wave 80 kilometers wide. It was square across the road to Bitter Well, and it was coming to meet them. In the white skiff, second witness Morn ran the projections twice. Witness. The storm's leading edge intersects the convoy's route in 40 minutes. Visibility inside will be functionally 0. Our airframe cannot hold station in it. We will have to climb above and lose direct observation. The combine's gunwings will have to do the same. The wheel hunters will shelter and wait. A pause. Everything stops, witness. Everything on wheels, everything in the air. That is what the storm means here. The pursuit, the flight, the record. It all stops until the pan can see again. Heil watched the lead rig, watched it hold 140 kilometers an hour straight at the bone. White wall, watched the little brass shape on its roof glint once in the last of the clean sun. Second witness, Heil said slowly. I do not believe anyone has told her that. On the convoy band, somebody had told her exactly that, several times, and was getting nowhere. It's 80 kilometers of blind, Della. Castor Lyle, who had driven this pan for 9 years and feared precisely two things on it, and this was both of them. Nobody runs a whiteout. Not the Combine, not the Guild, not the Vorta. You park, you seal your intakes, you wait it out. It's the law of the place. It's the habit of the place, Della said. Habit's not law. Hadrasa's only got one law with wheels on it, and I'm reading her paper tonight. We can't see in it. Nobody can see in it, Della said. And the grin in her voice this time was the dangerous one. The one Tarrant called her storm grin. The one that meant she'd already done the arithmetic and liked the answer. Castor, sweetheart, think it through with me. The hunters can't see in it. The gunwings can't fly in it. The gravamen, that fat rolling courthouse sitting on my road, cannot move 1 meter in it, because Combine Doctrine parks everything in a whiteout. And Combine Doctrine is the only thing Factor Amarat trusts more than money. For everybody on this pan wearing green, that storm is a wall. She let half a second go by. For us, it's a door. 80 kilometers wide and absolutely free of witnesses, hooks, nets, writs, and clever ideas. We go in the east side doing 120, and we come out the west side 3 hours closer to the cut than any living soul believes possible, and the whole Combine recovery apparatus will be parked in a row on the graded road with salt drifting up their hubcaps. Praying we did the same thing. Her voice dropped, just for a beat, into something that wasn't performance at all. I know what I'm asking. I've run 2 whiteouts in 11 years. They're why my hair's like this. But I can do it, and I can talk you all through it, and on the far side of that wall is everything. Anybody wants to park, say so now, no shame. We'll redistribute your souls and leave you the spare water. But ask your trailers first. Ask them what they want. Silence. Then on the band, faint, because it was coming through a trailer wall and a cargo mic, the sound of trailer 2. 80 children's voices and 100 adults under them, chanting the only human words most of them knew. Catch up, catch up, catch up. Well, Castor said unsteadily. Hells, you heard the cargo passengers, said Della. All rigs, storm rigs, seal intakes, lights on. 50-meter spacing, dead nuts on my line. Saba, Quill, strap the trikes on Sparrow's flatbed and ride cabs. Tarrant, pressurize my horn line off the main reservoir. We're going to need her voice. The plumb line dropped to convoy height one last time before the wall. The flute voice came onto the open band, and if a flute could sound carefully neutral in the way of a being suppressing an entirely new emotion, it did. Convoy lead. Confirm your intention. You are entering a Class 5 obscurant storm at speed. The adjudicate cannot observe inside. Events occurring within are unrecorded. Whatever the Combine does in there, whatever anyone does, the record will show nothing. Witness Heil, Della said cheerfully, hauling her storm scarf up over her nose. The Combine won't be in there. Doctrine won't let them. It'll just be us and the wind. She paused then, because fair was fair, but that cuts the other way too, doesn't it? You can't see us. For 3 hours, you can't confirm the persons under my care are alive, well, and willing. The record hates a gap. So here's what I'll do for the record. Every 10 minutes on this band, storms pass low frequency just fine. You'll get my horn, 2 longs and a short. As long as you hear it, the delivery's rolling and every soul aboard is exactly where they choose to be. You can log a sound, can't you? A pause, flute slow, and then something that no Tyndall inflection had quite prepared the listening pan for, something almost warm. The adjudicate can log a sound, driver marsh. We will be listening above the storm. The record will reflect, the pause stretched, that the horn was heard. Then put your kettle on, witness. See you on the west side. The wall took them at kilometer 340. There is no describing a whiteout from inside honestly, except by subtraction. First the horizon went, then the sky, then the convoy, then the road, then the front of the Verdigris' own hood, until the universe was a sphere of rushing bone-colored light exactly 4 meters across, roaring like a sea, and Della Marsh drove 120 kilometers an hour into the middle of it, on instruments she didn't look at, by a sense she could not have named under oath. She drove by the wheels report, the grain of the hard pan coming up through the cord wrap into her, palms, a texture language of washboard and crust skin and soft drift telling her where on the old seabed she was. She drove by the engine's tone and the 8 axles' 8 separate songs. She drove by the compass, by count, by the map behind her eyes where 700 kilometers of pan lived in the only survey that had ever mattered, the one taken at speed, 11 years deep, and every 60 seconds exactly she pulled the horn, 2 longs and a short, and listened. The pan answered. That was the secret. The thing she'd learned in her second whiteout, and told no one because it sounded like religion. The brass threw its voice into the blind, and the land threw it back. And the shape of the echo was the shape of the country. Reef-bone ridges came back hard and close. Soft drift came back swallowed. The old wreck of the ore crawler at kilometer 361 came back as a flat metallic slap, right where it should be, a buoy in the white, and Della corrected 2 degrees north off it and ran on. Behind her, 4 rigs hung on her taillights, each driver staring at a smear of red in the white 50 meters in total faith, and on the band, constant, profane, unhurried, ran her voice. She never stopped talking. Washboard coming. 10 seconds, let it shake, don't fight it. Drift tongue left, 2 degrees right, now back. Sing out, Sparrow, you're drifting wide, close it up. There you are. She called the road she couldn't see for 4 rigs that couldn't see her. An unbroken thread of voice through 80 kilometers of howling nothing, and decades later, drivers who had been in that line would still go quiet when storms came over a horizon, and their grandchildren would know why. 20 minutes in, the storm found the convoy's weakness. It wasn't a chain or a hook. It was a freak gust bore, a horizontal tube of wind inside the wind, the kind whiteouts grew and physics declined to apologize for, and it caught Mother Opal's high side square on and shoved 400 tons sideways a full meter. Castor Lyle caught the slide, held the rig out of the soft drift by main strength and cold nerve, and the violence of it whipped his unsecured side window hatch open and brought it back across his left forearm with the whole storm's weight behind it. The brake was audible on his open mic. So was what he did next, which was finish correcting the slide one-handed, settle the rig back onto Della's line, and only then say, through his teeth, lead, Opal, I'm 1 wing down, forearm, I can hold the wheel maybe 10 minutes with it, then I'm lying to you. Stopping was death by burial. A parked rig in a whiteout drifted over in an hour. The bridge trick was impossible blind. Every driver on the band knew both facts, and into the 4 seconds of silence that followed them came a voice that had never spoken on the band before, a wet reed instrument, all breath, from the jump seat of Mother Opal's own cab, where the relief rider for Trailer 6 had been sitting wrapped in a blanket since the lagoons. I will hold the wheel. Her name was Olav the Third Pan, and she was 19 years old, and the Combine's rules for assets were explicit, and 3 centuries deep. No bonded person operates powered conveyance, ever, anywhere. It was the first rule of the clay, the load-bearing one, the rule under all the rules, because a creature that can drive can leave, Della said, while the wheel spoke crust skin and washboard into her hands, and the wreck echo of kilometer 380 came back true off the brass. You've watched Castor's hands since the lagoons. Tell me what the rig wants. It wants to be a little loose, Ulla said. The reed voice shook exactly once, and then leveled. He grips hard when the gusts come and the wheel fights him. Between gusts, he holds it like a tool he is sorry for. Small movements. He breathes out when he corrects. The lights of your rig sit just left of his sight line, and he checks them each time he breathes. I have counted his rhythm for 2 hours, driver. I have it. Castor, she has it, Castor said quietly. She's been driving this rig from the jump seat all day, Della. Same as I learned. Watching. Then swap belts, Della said, and listen to me. You're not breaking their rule. Hear me say it. Their rule died at 4 past dawn when your debt died. There's no rule in this cab but mine, and my rule is, the wheel belongs to whoever brings the rig home. Take the wheel. What came back down the band after a moment was not words. It was the sound of Mother Opal's horn, a tanker's deep single note, then a fumbling pause, then again deliberate, 2 longs and a short. The first horn call ever sounded on Hadrasa by Chenery hands. Above the storm, in clean sunlight, the plumb line circled with its antennas straining at the white sea below. Every 10 minutes, low frequency, faithful, 2 longs and a short. Morn logged each one. At the 8th horn call, instruments caught the second horn answering the first, the deep one, the new one. A call and answer rolling under 80 kilometers of blind, and Morn looked up and said, "Witness, there are 2 of them now," and Heil was silent for a long moment over the white. "When I was calved," Heil said at last, which was as close as a Tyndall ever came to telling a story, "my line elder defined the human species for me in 1 sentence, as our archive defines them. A frontier species, mechanically adept, individually variable, of moderate consequence." Moderate consequence. The witness watched the storm crawl east, carrying its impossible cargo of sound. Second witness, when we land at Padre Crossing, remind me to file a correction against the archive itself. I have been listening to the most consequential thing I have ever observed, and it is a brass horn in a dust cloud, driven by a woman who was rated cargo-class crew by every authority that ever tested her. The convoy broke out of the storm's western wall at kilometer 419 into late light the color of brass, all 5 rigs, all axles, all souls, and Della Marsh came out singing, horn roaring at 124 kilometers an hour, 3 hours and 10 minutes after the world had last seen her. Behind, parked in disciplined rows on the graded road on the storm's far side, 60 kilometers back and blind to all of it, sat the entire western recovery apparatus of the Valaki Combine, waiting respectfully for the weather, exactly as doctrine required. On the Gravamen's command deck, the stormwake reports came in one after another, outpost relays, scatter sensors, then the plumb line's own published log, which the adjudicate posted to all parties as the accord required. Factor Vesh Amarat read it twice. The convoy's emergency time, its speed, its heading, and the annex logged every 10 minutes for 3 hours. That said only Horn heard. Two long, one short. All souls accounted by sound. For the first time in a very long mineral life, Vesh Amarat raised his voice. What it cost him to lower it again was visible to his whole staff. Then he stood looking at the plot table, at the absurd red line of the convoy's storm transit drawn straight through 80 kilometers of doctrine, and he said, almost wonderingly, to Marshal Corsena's hovering image, "She isn't outrunning us, Marshal. We have the speed, the fuel, the road, the writ, and the time, and she knows it. She is doing something else entirely. She is making us choose over and over in front of the whole pan and the adjudicates instruments between admitting what we can't do and demonstrating it." He touched the plot where a small notation marked the hole in the tanker's flank. "There. That's the real number in this race. Fuel. Bitter well is ours, Garrett Henson since noon. Whatever she's planning, she must come to the well or die on the pan of plain arithmetic." He straightened. "Move everything. The moment the storm clears the road. Gravamen, the reserve, all packs, all wings. We stop reacting to the driver. We go sit on the arithmetic." The Gravamen's foredecks shuddered, and the fortress began to roll west. Bitterwell sat at kilometer 460. A fuel depot, a water bore, a maintenance shed, and a company store, all crouched around the only deep standpipe on the western run like beggars around a fire. The Combine had garrisoned it at noon, a platoon of company police, a spike chain crew, and 2 gun wings, all with orders to hold the fuel and wait, because the arithmetic said the convoy must come to them sometime after dark, dry-tanked, and humble. The arithmetic had not been told about the storm. Saba's report, delivered from a ridge 2 kilometers out while the convoy ran the last of the salt haze, was a masterpiece of compressed joy. "Lead, knock, knock. They are not ready. Say again, not ready. Both gun wings are down on the apron with their engine cowls open. Storm salt flush their mid-overhaul. Neither one flies inside an hour. Spike crews got the chain laid across the east gate but not tensioned. Half the platoon's in the store out of the dust. They think they've got till midnight, Della. They're drinking the good water." "Course they are," Della said. "Deleek says we're 3 hours east. Parked in a storm. Doctrine's been wrong since dawn and nobody's told it yet." She keyed the all-ban. "Listen close, children. Here's the shape of it. We're not raiding Bitterwell. Raids are for pirates. We are customers. We roll through that depot at 30. Polite as a parade. We take on what we're owed. We pay the market rate. And we are gone before their doctrine finishes clearing its throat. Henna, your bunkers are scrap, so we're not pumping anything anywhere. See the 2 fuel Bowsers parked off the gantry?" Saba had streamed the optics to every cab. 2 Combine heavy Bowsers, road-ready, brimmed that morning for the Gravamen's escort group, sat gleaming by the standpipe like a delivery some thoughtful soul had wrapped. "We're adopting the fat one. Tarrant takes it. Quill rides his hip and takes the thin one, empty or full. Quill, don't be greedy, it's a spare." Saba cuts the east chain at the post while they're still hunting the tensioner. "Andre, Castor, you're the parade. Big, loud, slow. Right down the main lane, soak up every eye. I'm the gate." "You're the gate," Andre repeated, in the tone of a man who had stopped being surprised in the funnel and was now simply archiving material for the memoir. "Westgate's a counterweighted boom with a guard shack," Della said. "Verdigris weighs 400 tons. I'm the gate." It went. Afterward, witnesses on both sides agreed, almost exactly the way she called it, which was the most frightening part. The convoy came out of the salt haze line abreast in the low brass light, horns sounding, not the alarm anyone trained for, but a wall of noise that made 40 company policemen each independently conclude the situation was already lost, and resolved at the last moment into a column that threaded the depot's main lane at a stately 30 kilometers an hour. Saba's torch had the east chain off its post in 9 seconds. Tarrant crossed from the Verdigris's running board to the fat Bowser's cab while both were technically in motion, had her turning before her chocks finished bouncing, and slotted her into the column between Sparrow and the long drink, with the smoothness of a man rejoining traffic. Quill took the thin Bowser, 3/4 full. As it turned out, nobody was greedy. The day simply provided. The platoon's lieutenant, to his lasting credit, got 1 squad into the lane with a portable spike strip, looked up into the grill of Mother Opal coming on at 30, with a 19-year-old Chenery at the wheel and Castor Lyle's splinted arm waving cheerfully from the jump seat window, and made the only command decision of his career that anyone would remember. He picked up his spike strip and stepped back, and at the lane's end, where the west boom gate stood lowered and locked, the Verdigris, which had idled through the depot dead slow, contributing nothing but presence, like a chaperone, gathered herself over 200 meters and took the boom off its pivot at 60. The counterweight described a parabola that cleared the guard shack by a generous margin and planted itself in the company store's water garden, which was, the entire garrison agreed in their depositions, the most expensive thing Delamarche did not destroy that afternoon. What she destroyed instead was the narrative. Because as the convoy cleared the west gate, 7 vehicles now, one of them stolen, 2 of them combined green, the Verdigris slowed beside the depot office, and Delamarche leaned out of her high window and threw a sealed guild payment satchel at the feet of the gaping depot master. Her voice arrived with it, all band at large, immortal. 2 Bowsers, 1 boom, market rate plus a third for the inconvenience. Plus the going price of a garden. Count it before you cry to your factor. The Free Carriers Guild pays its bills same day, which is more than your paymaster's ever managed. And tell him, the horn came down on top of her own voice, 2 longs and a short, as the Verdigris pulled away west into the long light. Tell him the convoy regrets it couldn't stay, but we're expected at the cut by nightfall, and I hate to keep a courtroom waiting. High above, holding station in the cleaned air, second witness Morn finished the entry with the dazed precision of a recording instrument. Suspects it is becoming a storyteller. Convoy acquired fuel at Bitterwell Depot by transaction. Classification purchase. Sub-annotation. The seller had not previously been aware the goods were for sale. Witness Morn said. Confirm the classification stands? The Combine will appeal it. The payment was tendered, received, and is being counted as we speak, Hyel said. The boom was infrastructure, and she priced it. Let them appeal. The record will show that in the middle of being hunted by a recovery flotilla, the human driver stopped to settle an invoice. A pause. Appeals run on documents, second witness. She is leaving the Combine nothing to stand on but its own behavior. I begin to think that is not an accident. I begin to think nothing about her is an accident except the laugh, and I am no longer certain about the laugh. Aboard the Graveman, rolling west at its ponderous flagship best, Vesh Amarat received the Bitterwell dispatch in silence. Then the depot's inventory addendum. Then the adjudicate's classification. Purchase, he repeated. Factor Corsena's image said. Careful as a man crossing rotten glass, the convoy is fueled. Storm Transit put them 3 hours inside every projection. At current rates, they reach the meridian cut at dusk, before we can reposition the main body across their road. The arithmetic, he stopped. The arithmetic has been resigning all day, Amarat said. He stood over the plot table a long time, mineral still, and the red line of the convoy crawled west across it, and the white dot of the adjudicate skiff rode beside it like a conscience. There remains, he said at last, the Leth Trench, the old sea's deepest scar, 200 meters down and 9 wide at the crossing point, and over it one bridge, Marshall, 1, built by this Combine, owned by this Combine, maintained by this Combine. Article 40 of our charter, the Combine may close its own infrastructure for emergency works at its sole discretion. He looked up, and what was in his face had stopped being anger some hours ago, and become something leaner and more dangerous, the expression of a creature renegotiating with reality. Notify the engineering corps at Span Station. The Lethe Bridge is structurally unsound as of this hour. Close it, Marshal. The charges we keep against seismic collapse. The demolition prep in the South Caisson. Bring the firing keys to readiness. Corps was quiet for a moment. Factor. If we drop the span, we cut our own western artery for a year. The rebuild cost is less than the precedent, Amarat said. 341 chits? Marshal. There are 900,000 more on this pan, and every one of them is listening to her horn on somebody's stolen receiver, and as of this afternoon, some of them are driving. The cost of the bridge is the cheapest thing on the table. The convoy cannot cross the trench anywhere but the span. No vehicle can. So, she reaches the bridge and finds it closed, with the gravamen astride the eastern approach behind her and the trench ahead. No road, no storm, no depot, nothing left to buy, bluff, or outdrive. And then, in full view of her beloved record, he tapped the white dot on the plot gently, almost fondly. We will be reasonable. The word reasonable arrived at the convoy 90 minutes later, at kilometer 540, wearing the green priority flash of a factor's office. This time Amarat did not open with compliments. Driver Marsh, you will be aware by now that the Lee Bridge is closed for emergency works. You will shortly confirm, through your outriders, that the closure is physical. The span is rigged for controlled demolition, the eastern approach is held in strength, and my flagship will be astride your back trail within the hour. The pan has run out of west, driver. So I am going to extend one final time an offer that I advise you to hear in full before doing whatever it is your reputation requires. I'm listening, Della said. The convoy band was dead silent. It's a long straight stretch, factor, and you bought the call, use it. Half, Amarat said. Hear the whole shape of it. 170 persons of your choosing cross the bridge tonight. I will open it for them. Myself under adjudicate seal, manumissions confirmed irrevocable. The Combine's appeal withdrawn as to them forever. The remaining 171 return with me, and I will table their files for reassessment under conditions the adjudicate may inspect. No prosecutions. The guild's bond restored whole. Your licenses, your futures, your tanker's hull, all of it mended. Half of everything you came for, real and sealed, and, tonight, against a bridge you cannot cross and a flotilla you cannot outrun. Even you must see the shape of that trade. Even you, driver, must know that half delivered is a triumph and all is a grave. And there it was, Della thought. The chitmaker's whole world in one sentence, offered in good faith, which was the terrible thing. By his lights it was generous, and by any sane freight yard arithmetic it was generous. 11 years of contracts had taught her exactly how generous, and underneath her hands the wheel ran steady and the pan ran west gold now, the light going long, and the shadows of the rig stretching ahead of them like fingers reaching for the cut. She looked across the cab at him of the shallows. He had heard every word. His webbed fist was closed around the clay at his neck, and his pouch was still. And he looked back at her and did not say anything, because the offer was not his to refuse, it was hers. That was what the morning's papers had cost her. The right to be the one standing where the combine aimed its mercy. She keyed the channel. "Factor," she said. "That's the best offer the Veliki combine has made in 300 years, and I want the record to hold that I said so." Her voice was even, almost gentle. "Now here's why it's worthless. You want me to choose the half. That's the whole machine right there. That's the machine wearing kindness like a coat, because whichever 170 I choose, the clay around the other 171 necks stops being a debt and becomes a price I set. You'd make me the combine's last and best factor, and you'd never have to chase a convoy again, because every soul on this pan would know that when the human driver had to pick, she picked, same as everyone the clay ever made pick." The evenness cracked open, and what poured through it wasn't rage, it was the laugh. Full, ungovernable, the laugh that had filled a freight office through 2 walls, rolling down the band into every cab and trailer and onto the adjudicate's eternal record. "Half. Amrit, you magnificent fossil, you still don't know what you're chasing. I'm a carrier. Ask anyone from here to the Letha Works. Ask your own logistics division, they keep my numbers framed. 11 years, 4,000 runs, and the Free Carriers Guild has never delivered half a manifest. Not once, not ever. The seal goes on whole or the seal doesn't go on. 341 souls departed the Letha Works at dawn, and 341 arrive at Padre Crossing tonight. And the only thing you get to choose, you and your closed bridge and your rolling courthouse, is whether you watch it happen from the east rim or the west." She cut the channel. She pulled the horn, 2 longs and a short, and the pan took it and rolled it west toward the trench. "Driver," Im said quietly into the ringing after. "The bridge is in fact closed." "The bridge is closed," Della agreed, "and rigged to fall. So he says, and I believe him." "Then forgive me, how does the manifest arrive whole?" Della was quiet for exactly as long as it took the verdigris to crest the last rise before the trench country began, and there it all was, laid out in gold and shadow, the land stepping down in long shelves toward the great dark line of the Leth Trench, the bridge at Span Station, lit green and crawling with combine engineering crews, the Gravamen's dust, huge and patient, closing in from the southeast, and north of the span, kilometer after kilometer of the thing most maps didn't bother labeling, and the old drivers called the glass water. The sunken pan, the lowest shelf of the Dead Sea, a vast blind flat sheet of crystallized brine crust shining like a coin, under which lay mud that had been digesting careless machinery for 10,000 years. Della said, "How much do you figure the verdigris weighs all up right now?" "You have said it many times. 400 tons. 406 this morning. Call it 380 after the day's fuel burn." She was already keying the manifest screen, already running axle loads, already mapping in her head the long, shallow line of the northern shelf, where the crust ran oldest and thickest, the line no surveyor had ever rated because no surveyor had ever been stupid enough to ask. "Now ask me what she weighs per square centimeter of tire patch. Ask me what she weighs the way the ground feels her. That's the only weight that's ever mattered, and it's the one number in this whole chase that nobody in that rolling courthouse has thought about, even once, because combine arithmetic stops where the road does." The storm grin came up, gold light catching her teeth, and she reached for the all band one more time. All rigs, all souls, last briefing of the day, and it's a beauty. The factor closed his bridge. "So we're not going to use his bridge. We're going to do something the pan hasn't seen since it was an ocean. We're going to walk on water." The briefing took 6 minutes, because it had to fit inside the time the convoy needed to swing north off the bridge road, and because Della Marsh had been writing in the back of her head, she would admit much later, for about 11 years. "The glass water's a crust," she said. "Crystallized brine over bottomless mud, and everyone knows you don't drive on it. And here's the thing about everyone. They never asked the next question. The crust isn't one thickness. It grew like ice grows in seasons, and on the North Shelf it's been growing since before the combine had a name. I've walked it. I've drilled it. 11 years of empty return legs, parked out here where the dispatcher couldn't see me, putting a core auger through it for the same reason other people whittle. She let that land. Along the line I'm going to call you, the crust runs 40 centimeters and better. 40 centimeters of salt glass holds a spread load of about 2 tons per square meter, sustained, and a lot more than that for half a second. And there's the whole church service, children. Sustained versus half a second. A parked rig sinks, a slow rig sinks. A rig at speed isn't a load, it's a wave. The crust doesn't have to hold you up. It has to hold you up until your wheels have moved on, and at 140 kilometers an hour, that's no time at all. Speed is the bridge. We bring our own bridge, and it's the throttle. And the numbers. Andre, calm as the trench itself. Loaded, we're what, 200 kilos a square centimeter at the tire patch? Which is why we're about to have a yard sale, Della said. Every rig sheds to fighting weight. Everything not a soul, a seat, water, or the fuel to finish goes onto the pan in the next 20 minutes. Spare track, spare plate, machine stock, deck cranes, ballast, the lot. Tarrant my long bed trailer too. Drop it whole. And both Bowsers stay east. Quill Tarrant top every rig's tanks to finish line plus margin, then park the fat one and the thin one side by side with a bow on them. The Glasswater wants us light, wide, and fast, and we're going to give the pan the most expensive trail of jetsam in the history of freight. It should have hurt. Every kilo on those decks was guild property, hauled and paid for and owned by people who owned little else, and the guild's whole bond was already burning in the morning's papers. It should have been grim. It was, instead, the most joyful 20 minutes of the entire run. They did it at a rolling walk along the North Shelf Road, deck crews heaving and whooping, and the pan behind the convoy bloomed with cargo like a strange harvest, a deck crane standing alone on the salt with its hook swinging, coils of cable arranged by someone with time on their hands and a sense of occasion into an enormous arrow pointing west. Castor's beloved spare engine block enthroned on a crate like a monument to a war nobody lost. Bryke organized the children of Trailer 2 into a chain to pass out every non-essential kilo of evaporator town luggage, and the Chenery, who had been told their whole lives exactly what they were worth down to the half centum, stood on the moving decks of a free convoy throwing the combine's weight off into the combine's desert, and they sang while they did it. The sound came through the trailer walls into every cab, 300 voices in the reed and water harmonies of the catchpans, singing the count of Della's horn. Lead, this is patience. Even Andre's dryness had something under it now. Empty racks, full tanks. I make my rig 290 tons. Never been this young in my life. All rigs at fighting weight, Della called. Now, Saba Quill, bring the trikes up. You're my crust readers. You weigh nothing. You ride 300 meters off my bows, left and right, and you watch the surface. Bloom gray is thick crust. Bone white is thin, and wet shine is goodbye. Call colors. I'll do the rest. Ool and the band went quiet, because everyone heard which name she'd reached for. Your rig runs second. Watch my water. Where my wheels darken the crust, the waves working. Stay 40 meters off my line, never in my tracks. The crust I've flexed needs a breath before it's load-bearing again. Every rig staggers the same. We cross like geese, not like a train. 90 seconds of spacing, nose to tail, and from the moment Verdigris's wheels touch glass to the moment sparrows leave it, nobody, and children, I am for once not joking, nobody slows down. The crust forgives speed. It keeps everything else. The Gravamen saw the turn north, of course. The whole eastern horizon was the Gravamen by then, a moving escarpment with its escort packs fanned ahead of it, and from its command deck the convoys swing away from the bridge road red for 9 beautiful minutes as despair, a hunted thing bolting up a blind alley, with the trench on its left hand and nothing ahead but the shining void of the Glasswater. Corsenna understood first, perhaps because hunting was his trade and doctrine only his employer. He stood at the plot, watching the convoy shed mass like a creature shrugging off a coat, watching the spacing open out, watching the 2 laden Bowsers drop away east, and he said quietly, she's not cornered. She was never cornered. She's been driving to that shelf since the storm. Across the Glasswater, Amarat's voice held no disbelief. The day had worn that organ out of him. What it held instead was calculation, fast and final. Depth of crust on the North Shelf, Marshal, unsurveyed, no data. No combine vehicle has ever, core stopped. No data factor. She has the data, Amrat said. She's had it for years. We rated her cargo class. He looked at the plot one last long moment at the white dot of the adjudicate skiff already swinging north to keep its eternal station, at the red line bending toward the shining shelf, at the bridge he had closed standing greenlit and useless over the trench like a monument to the wrong idea. Besh Amarat made the last bet of the chase, and to his species' credit, it was at least the honest one. All escort packs north, full speed, intercept line ahead of the shelf. Stop them on the hardpan before the crust, whatever it costs in front of the record. And the gravamen, he laid one long mineral hand flat on the plot, on the shining nothing of the glass water, follows them onto the glass. The flag captain turned. Factor, the flagship mass is 11,000. I am aware of what my own flagship weighs, Amarat said. I am also aware of what it will mean on this pan tomorrow if 300 tons of guild scrap iron crosses water my charter could not follow. The combine is mass, Captain. Mass is the argument. Make it. The intercept on the hardpan was the worst 90 seconds of the run, and afterward nobody pretended otherwise. Course packs came in from the southeast with the low sun behind them, 26 vehicles with nothing left to save for later, and there was no funnel geometry now, no storm, no gate to be, just open ground, a closing wedge, and the last kilometer of hardpan before the crust line. They came for the verdigris first, because every doctrine ever written says kill the head and the snake stops, and they were close enough by then to see what the day had been failing to teach them. The head of this snake was wherever Delamarche said it was. Column, scatter weave, she bellowed, and 5 rigs and 2 trikes stopped being a column at all. It was the formation with no name in any manual, the one she'd drilled them on in the empty quarter south of the Leith Works on 4 months of calibration runs, and it looked, from the plumb line's altitude, like a braid being woven at 140 kilometers an hour, rigs crossing each other's wakes, swapping stations never twice in the same order, every driver reading the next slot off the rig ahead the way Ulla had learned a wheel from a jump seat, by watching, by rhythm, by faith. Dust went up like a curtain, the wedge hit the braid and the braid wasn't there, and then the braid hit back. Mother Opal shouldered a hunter's blocking line into its neighbor's path. Patience ran 2 spike crews nerve clean off the field without touching either, and the verdigris, appearing out of her own dust wall in the wrong place at the worst time, walked her 380 tons through the wedge's hinge point like a thumb through wet clay, and the wedge was 2 halves of a formation watching 7 vehicles run for the shining water. 1 hook landed. A single claim anchor, fired in desperation from the last hunter with range, took the Sparrow through the rearmost trailer's corner post, and Yusufantar, with the crust line 800 meters off his bows, did not cut it loose. He read his own moment with a clarity that put him, that night, permanently into the pan's long memory. He dropped 2 gears, took the hunter's whole mass onto his hitch, and towed it, wheels locked, plowing salt, its crew bailing out the sides at 60, the last 800 meters to the crust line, where he finally let the torch take the cable and delivered the empty, furrowing wreck out onto the thin, bone-white glass at the shelf's edge like a calling card. It went through the crust in a bloom of gray water and kept going down, and the whole pan watched it go. That's the glass water, Della said softly, all banned as the wreck's wake settled into stillness behind them. Now everybody forget you saw it, watch my horn and fly. And the verdigris's wheels rolled off the hard pan of the Veliki charter onto 40 centimeters of salt glass over 10,000 years of dark, and the sound changed. Every voice in the convoy went quiet at once, because under the engines the world had begun very faintly to ring. It rang like a struck glass the size of a sea. Every wheel's passage ran out through the crust in ripples of tone, and the tones met other tones and came back changed. And within a kilometer, Della had stopped hearing it as a noise and started hearing it as instruments, the glass water reporting itself continuously to anyone whose hands had spent 11 years learning to listen. Colors! Saba called from 300 meters off the left bow, skimming the trike over the glass like a flung stone. Bloom gray ahead and right. Bone white seam at your 10-400 meters. See it. Della bent her line 2 degrees right, easy as breathing, and called it back down the band. All rigs, my track bends right at the marker wreck. 40 meters off my line, watch my water, talk to me. Your wheels darken the glass? Ul's reed voice came, steady now, almost singing. The terror had burned off her somewhere on the hard pan and left something else, something her species had no word for yet. The dark follows you like a shadow under the sea, driver, and then it pales. I am counting the paling. 9 seconds. I stay clear of 9 seconds. That's it. That's all of it. 9 seconds and 40 meters and 140 an hour, and that's the whole law of this church. The convoy crossed the glass water into the sunset. 7 vehicles at flank speed in goose stagger on a sheet of ringing salt, throwing long blue shadows and twin plumes of crystal off every wheel, and there was no chase anymore, not really, there was a procession. The Vorta sleds had come, a dozen 30, then more sleds than anyone had ever seen in one skyline, fanning along the shelf's northern margin on their 10 centimeters of draft, pacing the rigs, bearing witness the only way the pan's oldest people knew how, by being there. The plumb line rode the air alongside at convoy height, All instruments live, and behind, committed past any factor's power to recall it, came the gravamen, 11,000 tons. It came on with the courage that even Della, watching her mirrors, granted it freely. Its escort packs had balked at the crust line. Wheel hunters were local men. They had all heard the glass water ring in their childhood nightmares. But the flagship's 8-track bogies rolled off the hardpan without a pause, because the math said the crust's failures were point loads and a track spreads load, and the math was even right. For 6 kilometers, the math was right. The gravamen made 19 kilometers an hour on salt glass, grinding a white scar, gaining on nothing, losing ground with every minute to a convoy doing 140 but moving, and that was the argument. The combine goes where the quarry goes. Mass is the argument. From the verdigris's cab, Im watched the fortress shrink in the mirrors and said, "It is not trying to catch us. It cannot." Why does it follow? Because the factor's not chasing souls anymore, Della said. He's chasing tomorrow. If that thing crosses, the story dies. The story can't be. The pan held the convoy, and the combine couldn't follow. He'd rather sink his own flagship than feed that story. She checked her mirrors again, and for the first time all day, there was something almost gentle in her voice. "And he is going to sink it, Im. He's reading crust strength off my crossing, and he masses 30 times what I do, spread over 8 tracks that never let the glass breathe. I'm a wave, he's a weight. The glass water took 10,000 years to learn the difference, and it's about to spend all of it at once. Watch." It happened at kilometer 6 of the Gravamen's crossing, in the last red light, with the whole pan watching. The Vorta from their sleds, the adjudicate from its station, the convoy in its mirrors, the escort packs from the safe hardpan, and 900,000 chitted souls by relay and rumor and stolen receiver, the ringing under the flagship changed key. The Glasswater's report, continuous since the first bogey touched it, dropped a full octave, a tone Della heard even at 14 kilometers distance and would hear, sometimes for the rest of her life, and the crust beneath 11,000 tons stopped behaving like a bridge and remembered all at once, across a front 300 meters wide, that it was the lid of a sea. The gravamen did not plunge. The pan was not dramatic that way. It was a patient god even in victory. The flagship settled, by the bows first, slow as a closing eye, tracked bogies churning gray brine slurry up over the deck line, 4 decks of recovery apparatus tilting into the position the pan had decided they would occupy from now on, and stopped, hull deep, fast as an insect in sap, upright and absurd and forever. Every alarm aboard discharged at once across the open band, and then one by one, embarrassed, fell silent. The crew walked off across spread evacuation mats with the unhurried gait of men who knew the mud below had no appetite for anything as light as a person. The pan was merciful to anything that didn't insist on weighing 11,000 tons. Nobody died. Everybody saw. And out of the wallowing, settling immensity of it, on the green priority channel, open to all bands. Because there was no point in privacy anymore. There was never going to be privacy on this pan again, came the voice of Factor Vesh Amarat. And what it said was the strangest thing the day had yet produced. "Driver Marsh." A pause. The sound behind him of brine slurry finding new levels in his flagship. "Confirm a detail for me, for my own ledger. The northern shelf line you are driving. You said you cored it. 11 years of return legs, empty trailers off the clock alone with an auger. No pay, no order. No purpose any rational doctrine could name." "What?" Della keyed the channel, and the answer came out of her before she had decided anything, which was how the truest ones always traveled. "Because the pan was there, Factor," she said. "Because it was a road nobody had driven, and I'm a driver. You spent 11 years measuring me by what I carried. I spent them learning what carries me. That's the whole gap between us, and you just parked your flagship in it." She didn't gloat past that. Tarrant noted it, Andre noted it, the record noted it. The channel stayed open, and she simply let it be. The ringing glass and the engines, and somewhere behind the cab 300 voices singing the horn count, and after a long while Amarat said, in a tone no Sarkle Factor had used in 3 centuries of charter, "The Combine's Western recovery operation is concluded. Gravamen out." In the plumb line, Heil watched the fortress's running lights burning at their absurd tilt, marking the spot like a buoy on a reef, and dictated, for the formal record, the sentence that would be read aloud in the Padre Crossing Tribunal Hall, and in the freight offices of 11 worlds, and in Chineri school pans for a very long time. At dusk on this date, the Veliki Combine asserted that its charter extended to the limits of the pan, and the pan declined to confirm, which left the west, which left the dark line of the shelf's far shore rising in the last light. The hard pan beyond it running 10 flat kilometers to the surveyed posts of the meridian cut, and one final thing between the convoy and the line, because Vesh-Amarat had stopped, but Vesh-Amarat had never been the only creditor on this pan, and desperation had a doctrine of its own. It was Corsena. It was always going to be Corsena. A marshal whose whole career was the recovery bounty, whose company was paid by the head, who had been humiliated at the Narrows and outrun in the storm and unhorsed on the hardpan, and who now put everything that would still roll on one last line, not a wedge, not a net, a wall. 14 vehicles parked nose to tail across the convoy's landing point on the far shore, across the only stretch of margin where the crust shelved, up gently enough for rigs to climb back onto land, with spike chains rigged between their hulls, and Core's voice on the open band, raw as a wound, broadcasting the only writ he had left: "You can't stay on the glass forever, driver. Crust's thinning ahead of you everywhere, but here, your own scout's colors say so. This is the door, and I'm the door now. And your 9 seconds and your 40 meters don't move 14 parked hulls. Land short and sink, land long and sink, or land here, on the chains, at speed, in front of your record. The bounty pays on heads, Marsh. Live or otherwise. I'm past caring which column they write you into." He had, at last, found the version of the problem with no clever answer. The convoy band heard it and went quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before grief. Saba's colors confirmed it, bone white and wet shine north and south, the one gray landing lane plugged with steel. And the rigs ran on, at 140 across the ringing glass with the fuel of margin burning away and the dark coming down and nowhere, for the first time since dawn, to put the next 9 seconds. And in the high cab of the Verdigris, Della Marsh looked at the wall of hulls growing on the far shore, and at her gauges, and at the chit hanging around the neck of him of the Shallows, and asked the question that broke the day open. Your people cut the catchpans into the living crust at the Lethe works. Shaped it wet, let it cure. 300 years of brinecraft. Her eyes never left the shore. If you wanted this glass thicker, right here, right now, tonight, could it be done? The pouch went still. Then it worked faster than she'd ever seen it. Not thicker, said, colder. Brine glass cures by the wet bulb wind. Driver, every catchpan child knows the night skim. When the sun drops and the wind crosses clean ice brine, the skim thickens a finger width in minutes. It is why we harvest at dusk. The webbed hand came up, pointing, not at the landing lane, but south of it at the long shelf of wet shine, the forbidden mirror, the unset glass. That shine is tonight's skim, already curing. Too thin for you now. But the wind makes it. And driver, and here the old voice did something it had never once done in 300 kilometers, and rose, loud, into a register that filled the cab and spilled onto the open band. The voice of a foreman of the catchpans calling the harvest: "Your wheels make wind." For a heartbeat the cab was silent except for the ringing of the glass, and then Della Marsh began to laugh. And this time it was different from every laugh the day had heard out of her. Lower, slower, almost reverent. The laugh of a gambler watching the last card turn out to be the one she'd somehow always known was coming. "Say it plain, old friend," she said. "Say it for the band. Say it for the record. Tell them what we're going to do." "We are going to farm," said, onto the open band, in the foreman voice. And 341 former harvesters of the Veliki brine fields heard their own oldest skill called up out of the clay like a sword. South of the marshal's wall lies tonight's skim, new glass, curing in the dusk wind, 2 finger widths thick and growing. Left alone, it bears a child by midnight and a rig by spring. We do not have until spring. We have until the fuel gauges say otherwise. So we will not leave it alone. Moving air cures brine glass, the wet bulb wind, the night skim wind, and this convoy is the largest moving air machine ever assembled on this pan. We run the racetrack, drivers. We run circles on the safe gray crust along the skim's margin. Every rig, full speed, round and round. And our wheel wind and our wake spray work the new glass the way harvest fans work a catchpan. And we are not alone. The webbed hand pointed north, at the running lights of the Vorda fleet streaming along the shelf. Every sled out there carries a fan that can blow 10 centimeters of draft into a gale. Sledmen, children of the pan, you came to watch the clay break. First you must help the pan grow the road it breaks on. What answered? Out of the dark was the Sandrew voice from the lagoons, incredulous and delighted beyond any money. Loud one. Is your foreman asking my whole fleet to fan a salt skim by moonlight so a freight convoy can drive across water that wasn't there at sunset? That's the job, Della said. Pays nothing. Story's worth everything. You in? In, the Vorda roared. Loud one. My grandmother is going to make me tell this with my hands for the rest of my life. Sleds! All fans to the skim! What followed was the strangest 2 hours in the recorded history of Hadrasa, and the plumb line recorded all of it, because that was what the plumb line was for, and because no instrument aboard could have been pried off it with tools. On the far shore, Corsena's wall sat astride the gray landing lane, engines idling, watching the convoy do. What? Circles. 7 vehicles running a flattened oval, kilometers long, flank speed, along the margin between thick crust and thin, again and again, headlamps carving the dark, twin plumes of crystal spray standing off every wheel and drifting south on the made wind. And south of them, swarming low over the forbidden mirror of the new skim, 50 Vortisleds ran patterns their clans had never run in open day. Fans ducked down and aft, breathing across the curing glass in long organized passes, foremen's hands flashing sled to sled in harvest sign no combine overseer had ever bothered to learn. And from the trailers of the circling convoy came the Chenery's part, the part nobody watching ever forgot. The harvest song of the catchpans, 300 voices keeping the count by which brine farmers had timed a cure for 3 centuries, slow verses, while the skim drank the wind, quick verses to call the test. At each quick verse, Saba took the trike out onto glass that had not existed at sundown, farther each time reading color by headlamp, bone white, gray at the edges, bloom gray. Gray, Saba screamed. The 4th hour of the dark, from 2 kilometers out on the night's new road. Bloom gray led, gray all the way to the south margin shallows. It shelves up onto hardpan past the old reef line, and Della, there is nothing parked there. Nothing. It's a door. The pan grew us a door. On the far shore, Corsena heard it too. Every band was open. Secrecy had died hours ago, along with doctrine, arithmetic, and the flagship, and his wall of 14 hulls came apart in a panic of engines, racing south around the shelf margin to plug a landing that had not existed when he'd built his wall. It was 11 kilometers by land around the wetshine. He had fast vehicles and he drove them hard, and he did the sums as he went, and the sums told him he would arrive in 9 minutes. The convoy crossed the night skim in 7. It crossed in goose stagger by the light of headlamps and a low fat moon, on glass grown that evening by wheel wind and fan breath, and the oldest work song on the planet, crossed at 140 kilometers an hour. Over 2 hours of miracle measured in finger widths, every rig riding the 9-second law, Ula's reed voice calling the paling count for the column like a litany, and the glass water rang under them in the new key of the new glass, a higher, younger, stranger tone, and that was the sound, every driver said afterward, that they would take to their graves before any other sound of that whole impossible day. The pan itself, singing under their wheels, brand new. The new glass nearly took its toll all the same. At the crossing's midpoint, with 3 kilometers of finger-width miracle behind her and 2 ahead, the long drink's patched flank let go, the weld and sealant scab over bunker 2, hammered all day and chilled all evening, peeled open along half a meter, and several tons of fuel shifted to the torn side in one rolling surge. On 40 centimeters of cured crust, it would have been an ugly lurch. On tonight's glass, it was a death sentence with the date left blank. The tanker yawed, her load sloshed back, the yaw fed the slosh, and Hennevo found herself riding a pendulum at 140 over a skin. The harvest song was still curing. Lead, long drink, I'm oscillating, she reported, and her voice did the thing the convoy's voices had learned from its Lee-T, which was to get calmer as the numbers got worse. Periods about 4 seconds and growing. I damp it with the wheel. I'm steering off your line. I hold your line. The 3rd or 4th swing puts my flank wheels through the skim. Then we change the period, Della said, with the answer arriving in her mouth the way it always did, mid-sentence, at speed. You can't damp a slosh with a wheel, Henna, but you can starve it. Quill your trike, her lee side now. Henna on my horn, you throttle up hard. Acceleration pins the load aft and kills the swing. The slosh can't walk if the floor keeps tilting one way. You're going to cross the fastest stretch of new glass on this pan at the highest speed of your life, going up the whole way. 9 seconds stops mattering. You won't be on any piece of it for 3. And the far margin? I arrive how fast exactly? Hot, Della said. The reef shallows shelve long and the hard pan runs flat for 10 kilometers. Land hot, break on dirt. The pan grew you a runway, sweetheart. I watched it do it. Quill rides your shadow and calls your colors. Horn in 3, 2, 1. The brass went out over the night skim, 2 longs and a short, and the long drink put her head down and ran, engine wide open, load pin, the oscillation starving exactly, as ordered, faster across the youngest glass than any wheeled thing had ever moved on Hadrasa, and the skim rang. Under her in a key the glass water had never produced in 10,000 years and has never produced since, one long rising note like a wet finger on the rim of the world, and then she was up the reef shallows and onto dirt at a speed Hennevo declined ever. Afterward, to confirm, brakes glowing, horn blasting one long-sustained bellow of pure unprofessional triumph. Tankers across, Quill reported, somewhat breathless. Tanker is extremely across. Log it, Della said, grinning at the dark. Then everybody breathe out. Geese, reform. We're 4 minutes from the end of the charter. The Verdigris's front axles touched the hardpan of the southern shore at 4 minutes past full dark. And behind her, one by one, at 90-second intervals, Mother Opal, Patience, the long drink riding light and patch, the Sparrow, the 2 trikes howling up the reef line shallows. The whole manifest of the Free Carriers Guild came up off the Dead Sea onto land where the writ of the Velishi Combine ran thin as the morning's promises, with 10 flat kilometers between them and the line, And Corsena's lights, still 4 minutes behind, beaten by a road that had not existed at dusk. There was no last stand. There were no more doors to be. The 14 hulls ran the pursuit anyway, because the bounty was the bounty, and the convoy simply outran them across the last of the charter on honest flat ground, the way it had always been going to end if the Combine never managed to make it end another way. Speed against speed, hand against doctrine, and the hands had been better all day. The Meridian Cut came up out of the dark as a line of white survey posts catching the headlamps, stretching north and south to the ends of seeing, and beyond it the lights of Padre Crossing low on the horizon, and short of it, straddling the freight road in the last 100 meters of Combine. Ground. One final vehicle, the white skiff, landed waiting. Witness Heil of the Adjudicate stood beside it in the road, slight and pale in the headlamps, one hand raised not in challenge, in ceremony. Della brought the convoy down out of its run, gentle as setting down a sleeping child, and stopped the verdigris with her front bumper 6 meters from the witness, engine settling to idle, the first time her wheels had been still since dawn. The pursuing lights of Corps' column slowed too, far back, and stopped, and hung there in the dark, watching, because there was nothing left for them to do, and a marshal who puts a hook on a convoy under an adjudicate's raised hand in arm's reach. Of the cut is a marshal who ends his career in a tribunal dock. Heil's flute voice did not need the band now. It carried in the still air over the idling engines, formal and clear, to every cab and trailer and to the 50 Vorta sleds settling along the shelf. Line and to all the listening pan, convoy lead. Before the line is crossed, the record requires 3 confirmations by Article 9. First, identify your cargo. Della leaned out of the high window of her cab into the lamplight, and her voice came back at ceremony's own pitch, but it came back at Della Marsh's volume, and it carried at least as far. No cargo aboard, witness. 341 passengers, plus crew. The manifest says souls, and the manifest is correct. Second, the said passengers carried freely, and do they cross freely? From the trailers, unrehearsed, through the walls, through the vents, in 2 languages and 1 horn count, came the answer, 300 voices strong. And the record took it down verbatim because there was no other way to take it down. Catch up, catch up, catch up. The witness's pale head inclined. The record, Heil said, will reflect an affirmative. Third confirmation. Driver, state your name and profession for the permanent record of the Accord in your own words. And Della Marsh, 11 years a guild carrier, 4,000 runs, dust to her eyelashes and her forearms aching, and the best day of her life, 19 hours old, looked down the lamplight at the little white figure and gave the answer that the Tyndall archive holds to this hour, flagged in the margin in witness Heil's own hand. Definitional, do not summarize. Della Marsh, I drive. Then drive, said the witness of the adjudicate, and stepped aside from the road. The verdigris crossed the Meridian Cut at walking pace, horn sounding 2 longs and a short, and the rest of the convoy came over behind her, and the moment Sparrow's last wheels passed the white posts, the counter-writ of the Veliki Combine, recoverable assets, lawful ground, the whole morning's architecture of clay expired in the only way that mattered. It ran out of planet. They did the braking at dawn, because Im asked for the light. It happened on the freight apron at Padre Crossing on Accord ground in front of the Tribunal Hall, with the town turned out and the Vorta fleet drawn up along the margin, and the plumb line's instruments live, and Hadrus the white sun coming up over the rim of the world it had boiled. 341 chits of fired blue clay lifted that morning from 341 necks, some by their wearers' own hands, some by hands too old or too young or too overcome. The oldest chit 3 centuries deep in one family's line, the newest stamped 11 days ago for an infant in trailer 2, were laid in a single row across the apron's western road, seal side up, the Veliki crest glinting in the new light like a long blue scar. Della walked the row once, end to end, with Im at her shoulder. She had been loud for 19 hours and would be loud again in 20 minutes. And the apron crowd, who knew her only as a legend with a horn, watched her be silent and learned something the legend always leaves out. Then she climbed the verdigris's ladder and settled into the seat her body knew better than any bed, and looked at Im of the Shallows sitting beside her with his neck bare for the first morning of his long life. Foreman, she said, call your harvest. Im leaned to the window. The reed voice went out over the apron, in Chenery, then in trade tongue, the call of the catchpans, the call his line had answered under the seal for 300 years and would answer under it never again. The pans are full. Bring it in. The verdigris rolled. 8 axles, dead slow, straight down the row. And the clay went under the wheels of the road that had carried them, chit by chit by chit, each one cracking with a small, bright ceramic snap that the apron stones threw up into the morning. 341 little reports like a long string of festival crackers, and over them rose the horn, 2 longs and a short, Again and again, and under the horn the crowds roar, and under the roar, if the record's instruments were to be believed, and they were always to be believed, the sound of 341 people breathing in at once, all the way down. What was left on the road when the rig had passed was dust and blue shards, and the law of Hadrasa was perfectly clear about its standing. Broken clay was wasteland, it belonged to nobody, it owed nothing, it never had. The tribunal took 4 days and was, as Della had promised the factor at dawn on the pan, an argument in her courtroom. The adjudicate's record ran 11 hours in formal reading. The manumissions were confirmed irrevocable on the first morning. The combine's review withered unargued. The guild's surety bond came back whole on the third day with interest, plus a finding of tortious interference in lawful carriage that paid for 2 new rigs, a tanker's hull, the world's most documented boomgate, and, line-itemed at Della's specific written insistence, 1 water garden replanted. The combine's charter survived, charters do, but it came out of the hall with 2 new words bolted through it like hull patches. Persons and wages, defined, date enforceable. 900,000 chits did not break that week, but the price of clay, as the freight offices put it, never recovered. Corsena's company dissolved by the spring. The pan's memory was long, and nobody would ride hunt for a man the glasswater had laughed at. The gravamen stayed where the pan had parked it, hull deep at its tilt, and became in time the Western Run's best-loved landmark. Drivers sounded their horns passing it, 2 longs and a short a courtesy to the dead idea inside. Factor Vesh Amarat was recalled by his shareholders, and on his last day on Hadrasa he did the one thing nobody had projected. He came down to the Padre Crossing freight apron on foot, located the verdigris, and stood at the foot of her ladder until Della came out on the platform and looked down at him. "Driver Marsh," he said, "my ledger requires a final entry, and I find I want it accurate. 11 years my office held your file. Cargo class crew, mechanically adept, of moderate consequence. I am going to write the correction myself, before my successor inherits the error. Tell me what you are." Della looked at him for a moment, the old fossil straight-backed in the sunlight, beaten and gracious and incurable, and then she laughed, not unkindly, and gave him the same answer she'd given the record, because the truth came first, and it was cheaper, and it was funnier. "I drive," she said, "write it big, your kind keeps misfiling it under small." The Tyndall, who are precise, did not misfile it. The adjudicate's archive entry for the events of that day on Hadrasa required a species classification footnote, and the footnote required a term, and the Tyndall language had none. Their kind had ridden guided rails between the stars for 9,000 years, and the concept hands, terrain, speed, judgment, joy, one being simultaneous, had no word. So witness Heil coined one, and the archive ratified it, and it passed in time into the trade tongue of 11 worlds, where it is applied to exactly one species. And within that species, especially to a certain temperament, loud, joyful, truthful, ungovernable, that turns up wherever the maps run out. The word is a compound. Rendered literally, it means the one the road obeys. Ull of the third pan was indentured to nobody, so she signed instead. First Chenery apprentice of the Free Carriers Guild, Hadrasa Local, sponsor 1D Marsh, who wept at the signing and denied it loudly for years. Bryke went to letters school, then to the law, and the combine came to regret that more than the bridge. Im of the Shallows lived 9 more years, all of them free, and rode the jump seat of the verdigris every harvest season to call the old count over new country, and when he died the convoy that carried him home stretched 11 kilometers. And Della Marsh went back to work, because she was a carrier, and the pans were full, and somebody had to bring it in. On a white morning the next spring, the dispatcher at Padre Crossing logged a guild rig outbound east with a cargo of well-drilling gear, a Chenery apprentice at the wheel for her first licensed kilometer, and a horn on the roof that sounded, as the rig rolled up the long road into the sun, 2 longs and a short, and kept sounding it mile on mile, loud past all professional necessity, long after there was anyone official left to hear. There was never anyone official left to hear. That had never once been who it was for. 2 longs and a short, still rolling, still free.